You have traveled far and wide, defeated enemy after foe. After hours of adventure and strife, you finally find yourself at the precipice, the summit, the apex of your journey. Before you stands the final boss, the source of all pain and misery in the world. You prepare yourself for combat, and as you do, a grand orchestral score engulfs your senses, and now it's become clear that this is the end. You try your hardest getting in any hit that you can to weaken your adversary, while at the same time avoiding any jabs they attempt on you. As you both learn each other's tactics, new ones are developed just as quick. After some time, you, the hero of the story, are blessed with the ultimate upper hand. One hit separates you from victory. You ready yourself for the final blow and take aim, and as you do, the score reaches new heights of grandeur, and you take the shot. But what about the opposite of this? Minimalism. It's the art of finding something greater in the smaller things we see in our everyday lives. Minimalism finds its home mostly in pieces of art, through pieces that challenge the connoisseurs of their artistry to find a deeper and more profound meaning to what is presented. The style is criticized a lot of the time for allowing laziness to become lucrative in the realm of art, thus devaluing the efforts of artists who spend hundreds of hours meticulously fine-tuning their pieces. It's a big reason why modern art is given such a bad reputation, and rightfully so. Just because you splatter paint on a blank canvas doesn't make it profound. There needs to be intent behind such a work, which is why when minimalism does work, it can create some of the most appealing artwork your eyes could muster. Because perfection is achieved not when there is nothing more to add, but when there is nothing left to take away. Now this brings us to music, and a lot of the theory that is applied to physical artistry can be applied here, and in all mediums for that matter. But out of all of them, music is easily the most versatile in how it's used. A song can be written to stand on its own, only for the purpose of being listened to, solely as a form of entertainment to be mass publicized and nothing less. Or, a song can be written more intentionally in order to make the listeners feel a certain way, to transport them to another space, another time, another dimension, the world that the composer intended. Scoring has been the cornerstone for multimedia ever since the days of silent films in the early 1900s. Depending on the situation on screen, a live band would play music pieces that accompany the visuals. As technology advanced, this became digital recordings, but the purpose stayed the same. Using different chords, key signatures, and tempos are the main components of what gives each piece of a soundtrack its feel. Is there a chase scene? Increase the tempo. Is there a romantic scene? Decrease the tempo and hit them with that B minor 11. Scoring is always going to be a dynamic process, meaning it's constantly changing and evolving at a frantic pace. 1 second the characters are on screen singing happily, and the next they're traveling through the smoldering ashes of a ransacked village. And of course, a score should reflect that. Any multimedia entertainment would benefit strongly from having a dynamic soundtrack, more so the faster that events change. And what medium fits this description better than video games? On a bare-bones level, movies and video games are scored pretty much identically nowadays, since some games have become so story-reliant and photorealistic that they might as well have been shown in theaters and no one would bat an eye. And some actually have been adapted thusly. But video games are far more dynamic than movies could ever be because you are given control of what happens. In a more open-ended game, you decide where to go, who to attack, who to talk to. The experience is reliant on putting you in the driver's seat of a character's adventure, and because of this, the setting and situation of your character could be different by the second, making it that much more difficult to score them, since there is no definitive moment when your current actions or situation will end. One person could take 15 seconds to clear a boss, while another could take 12 minutes just on that single attempt. Making it so both players could end on a climactic part of a song is difficult, especially when the song has to loop as well. But this is how a composer would score an intense battle or something of grand scale and importance. What I want to highlight in this video is how some games go about scoring their smaller and less significant moments. Of course, there's the obvious route of having the score be very lightly played, involving slow tempo, low volume, calming, and atmospheric music. But what about when a game's music does even less than that? but somehow manages to even make more out of it. What happens when the music takes a backseat to allow the world to become the soundtrack? This is the beauty of minimalistic video game music. During the making of this video, I was having trouble finding out what the type of music I'm thinking about is professionally called. I was bouncing between calling it ambient music or dynamic music, but I eventually stuck with calling it minimalistic because I feel like it fits the song's purpose more. It's a type of music that I grew up appreciating more because it's always been ingrained into my favorite games. So today, I wanted to go through some prominent examples of games that utilize a minimalistic mindset to musically score its moments. And honestly, what better game to start out on than what is probably the most famous and somewhat divisive example of when less is more in a game's music. Breath of the Wild is a phenomenal piece of art. Over the course of its 5-year development time, the team behind it worked tirelessly to create a beautiful, natural, handcrafted world for the player to explore, conquer, or even just simply take in. Breath of the Wild's take on the natural splendor of Hyrule is the most ambitious to date, featuring gorgeous lakes, a multitude of snow-tipped mountains, broad canyons, a menacing volcano, sprawling open fields, an endless ocean of sand and dust, and that is only the tip of it. Although the open sandbox world was a big selling point for the game, what really makes Breath of the Wild is how the world responds to the events of the Great Calamity. After years and years of slumber after being defeated in the past, the evil Calamity Ganon awakens again. The citizens of Hyrule attempted to prepare for the event by utilizing the ancient Sheikah technology that was used to defeat it before, but in a moment of sheer irony, Ganon corrupted and took control of the army which was poised to stop him, turning them on the people of the kingdom and sending them out to destroy any last remnants of civilization they could find. But through these events, Link is put through hell and nearly loses his life trying to guard Princess Zelda. Being on death's doorstep, he's ordered to be taken to the Shrine of Resurrection where he's put into a regenerative sleep for the next 100 years. Upon waking up, Link is left in a world that has been scorched by Calamity Ganon's terror. What were once bustling, populated living districts are now nothing but piles of ash and charred wood littered with the husk of a guardian. A sad reminder of what once was. Tens of thousands of lives were lost, including those of the 4 champions, Mipha, Revali, Daruk, and Urbosa, the mightiest warriors in all of Hyrule and very close friends of Link, all dead. The one thing stopping any further destruction is Zelda using her powers to contain Calamity Ganon within Hyrule Castle for as long as Link has slumbered. Link is but one man in a post-apocalyptic shell of the once great kingdom of Hyrule. Link is alone. And this is where the game's music comes in. Breath of the Wild's soundtrack functions to completely fit the visual themes of the game, one of them being finding tranquility in loneliness. Whenever Link is out in a field on foot, this theme will start to play. It's a very simple set of notes and chords played on a grand piano, sporadically. This theme will loop indefinitely with slight variations depending on small things that might happen as Link moves around. But what really catches my ear about this theme is the long, or almost needlessly long, break of silence between the notes being played. The break is primarily used to take the player's attention off of the music and have them focus on something else. And even when the music goes silent, the game is still anything but. The sound effects, the natural ambience of Link's various actions is put front stage whenever the music goes silent. Every sound you can imagine, from footsteps, to climbing, to swimming, to swinging your weapons, all gush with amazing sound design. So much so that even the weight of your weapons and clothing will affect how the sounds are presented. For example, if Link is carrying a heavy two-handed weapon, such as a Royal Claymore, as he runs around you can hear the jingling of the sword's metal. Same thing goes for when you're wearing the Guardian armor set. Each and every footstep you take feels way heavier. Breath of the Wild has a lot of amazing invisible sound design, more than I could do in this video, so I recommend Scruffy's video on the matter. He's an insanely talented creator and he deserves all the attention that he can get. Breath of the Wild's field music is almost entirely composed of these types of light piano pieces, and it's because of this that a lot of die-hard Zelda fans don't like the soundtrack. It's such a strong difference from the overworld themes of past games that were always grand, exciting, and always screamed, "Time to embark on your quest." But the silence in Breath of the Wild allows for the game to do what is difficult with games that are constantly blaring music, and that's juxtaposition. Let me give you a situation that anyone who's played this game has experienced. You're all alone walking through Hyrule Fields, the wind is blowing through the lush grass, the game is serenading you with enchanting piano chords, when suddenly... the Guardians wouldn't be anywhere near as terrifying were it not to be quiet. The juxtaposition, the stark difference in mood between the dead silence and the rapid note playing of the Guardians, creates sheer panic in whatever poor soul forgot to wear their stealth gear. Likewise, silence is also used in juxtaposition to elevate happier moments, such as when you, finally, through all the ruins, find a thriving civilization. The different towns and cities you find around Hyrule are some of the only locations that have fully fledged themes that aren't just a piano note every 2.3 seconds. When there isn't a lot of music to be seen elsewhere in the game, it really makes those first moments in a town special. Whether it's monsters, Hylians, Gerudo, Gorons, Rito, or Zora, music in Breath of the Wild is always associated with finally not being alone, for better or for worse. The excellent use of silence throughout the game creates all kinds of scenarios that exemplify the setting and world around you, and it's all used to make what is one of the most unique soundtracks of any Zelda game, and one of my personal favorites of all time. Animal Crossing is many things to many different people, but the discussion always circles back around to it being a game about the simple things in life: gardening, fishing, friendship, interior decorating, and the ever-looming inevitability of debt. If simplicity is the name of the game, then the music must reflect this, and Animal Crossing is an absolute masterclass in the field. The farming life simulator genre is one that's always been known for its soft, memorable, and almost nostalgic music. Games like Stardew Valley, Spiritfarer, and Harvest Moon all share concepts such as becoming friends with the other inhabitants of the world, and managing resources to improve a plot of land. They provide a great amount of escapism from the subjective monotony that is our day-to-day lives, and are used by many as outlets of relaxation. They take us back to an easier time when the biggest worries we had were forgetting to water the flowers or forgetting to hug someone who means something to you. The relaxing music of these games makes them just as memorable and nostalgic as the simplicity it's trying to simulate. But even though the music is light and relaxing, it's not all minimalistic. Stardew Valley in particular has a song called "A Flicker in the Deep," which plays while traveling through the early layers of the mines. It's a piece that features sparse patterns of electric piano, personifying the loneliness and the mysticism of the depths of Stardew Valley. And once again, just as with Breath of the Wild, loneliness plays a huge factor in the application of minimalism. Absence breeds absence, and this applies to the notes that accompany the absence. And when it comes to Animal Crossing, what better time to be lonely than 3 in the morning? The hourly themes of Animal Crossing are one of my favorite features of the game. Every one of the 24 hours in a day each has their own musical theme, reflecting the mood of that time of day. For example, the 8 AM theme evokes a feeling of getting up and being excited to start your day, while the 7 PM theme gives off the feeling that the day is slowly coming to a close. But when it comes to the late night and early morning tracks, there's a noticeable and progressive change in tone, almost as if the music is trying to speak to the player. As the hours pass between 9 PM and 5 AM, the music slowly gets more and more calming. Almost sleep-inducing. Until at 3 AM, when the game peaks as the music is basically telling the player, what the hell are you still doing up at this hour? After 3 is when the sun is starting to slowly rise and the nighttime gives way to dawn. 4 AM tells the player what's the point in going to sleep now? You're just going to have to wake up soon anyways. The night music ends at 5 AM when the game's main leitmotif is played on the piano, personifying a distant sunrise just over the water and the start of a new day. The game almost becomes self-aware of your determination to stay up so late, causing the music to become more and more tiring, or even just completely awkward. Most entries in the series have done this before, such as 5 AM from New Leaf. "6 AM from New Leaf. And 11 PM from the GameCube. Of course, who else would be awake at these hours? There is so little to do. Nook's Cranny is closed, the Able Sisters is closed, leaving only the museum, the Resident Services Center, and as of recently, the Roost. There sometimes will be the one stray villager claiming they're going for a walk, but aside from these four, you are the dumbass running around aimlessly in the middle of the night, all alone. But let's get lonelier. As if the dark unknowingness of night wasn't already enough to deter the villagers from going outside, a little rain can make a world of difference. And this is because the soundtrack of Animal Crossing is one that is insanely dynamic. Not only does the time of day and day of the year change the music, but so does the weather. Take a listen to this. This is the 3 AM theme from Animal Crossing New Horizons. The same one I played for you a few minutes ago. It's the same theme, but slightly altered. The percussion of the faint shaker sounds are nowhere to be found, and the bass line has been replaced by the hollow tones of a marimba. Playing the same theme we've heard before, but again in a more dissonant fashion, gives a sense of emptiness, a sense that something is missing. The sunshine, the other villagers, your feeling of complete sanctuary since you are now bound to the forces of nature and the rain itself. But of course, percussion can come in many different shapes and forms, so as you walk around outside, the pitter-patter of the rain itself acts as a percussion instrument, so that when you experience these themes in-game, they give a sense that something is different, but not so much that it becomes unsettling. Even some of the most upbeat hourly themes in the game become mellow, once put through the filters of the rain. In New Leaf, the music does the same, but to an even greater degree. Now, all the melodies and harmonies are completely replaced by the high-pitched and childlike tones of a glockenspiel, and the percussion is once again replaced by the rain. It's far more memorable and effective at conveying the feeling of walking around in the rain, like an innocent and naive child. It's a shame this wasn't done as much in New Horizons. But it doesn't take away from how accomplished this series is at making every day feel different. As you go about your duties as mayor and live out the fantasy of a simple town or tropical island life. However, every good thing has to come to an end. And when it does, what do you do next? One of the most potent uses of minimalism in the whole series is the music that plays on New Year's Day. Imagine this, if you will. The New Year's celebrations have all come to a close, a night worthy of true conclusiveness to an eventful year, a night to reminisce about the past 365 days and remember the times, good and bad, is over. And now that the year's begun, now what? Do you just go back to work or school and let life pass you by? What will the coming year hold? Will it be better than last year? Will it be worse, or will it be the same? These are the emotions that the New Year's Day themes personify. A pure feeling of incredulousness, hangover, and a lack of a plan. A lack of something to look forward to, since New Year's Day not only concludes the past year, but also the holiday season, a series of fun and memorable family gatherings and events that make you appreciate the people around you, a time that everyone spends the entire year waiting for. Specifically, the New Year's Day theme from New Horizons hit me incredibly hard, because in a weird way, it felt like the credits music for 2020, which is a year that I'm tired of talking about! But despite everything, my Animal Crossing island still stood tall on my Switch. And somehow, this little game about doing nothing incited so many of my favorite moments of that year. Just being able to have this virtual world to escape to was an absolute dream when the real world was less than favorable. The song gave me the feeling that everything in that coming year would be okay. Animal Crossing is an amazing series that uses simplicity to emulate the world of escapism that we all desire. And New Horizons is a game that has given me memories that I'm sure to remember for years to come. Before we go on to the final game I want to talk about, I'd like to sidetrack a little and go over some other specific instances in a good chunk of games that utilize minimalism in very notable ways, because they still deserve to be recognized, and not doing so would simply be disrespectful. First of all, Celeste. The game's soundtrack almost entirely features beautiful piano melodies composed by the ever-gracious Lena Raine, while sometimes changing to a grindy synth to represent Madeline's evil twin reflection. When you begin to enter a level, a postcard will appear on screen, giving the player a little tip of information. When it does, a motif will play that is taken from the theme of that level. And one more note as it leaves. It's an interesting precursor, almost hinting to the player of what is to come. But this type of orchestration doesn't occur in many of the levels. Even though the music is slow and free-flowing a lot of the time, it never reaches true minimalism until you reach the 8th stage in the game, the core. A place you can only reach after climbing all the way to the top of Celeste Mountain, and collecting a select number of hearts spread through the ends of the infamous B-side levels. It solidifies the idea that no one has ever really been to the core until this point. Many have tried, but Madeline is the only one to truly overcome the various tribulations that the mountain offers. And this is shown through the theme that plays in the small part of the level before you insert your blue hearts. The core's main melody plays in a largely slow and distant style, with large strands of silence for the piano to ring out and simulate the echoes of the cave itself. Once you insert your hearts and begin to actually progress, the synth takes hold and softness never returns for the rest of the level. Until the absolute end when you're floating through some sort of ethereal void. It's a highlight to not only Madeline's accomplishments, but to the players as well, because Celeste is not an easy game in the slightest. Despite EA's greed, The Sims 4 still manages to be very faithful to the classic Sims formula, even without spending hundreds of dollars on DLC. A big reason being that the game upheld the Sims tradition of the music being very graceful, orchestral, and nostalgia evocative, whether it's in the Sims creator, or the building mode, or the main menu. But when you actually begin to play the game in live mode, everything goes silent. The only thing left is the diegetic sounds of the world, including cars passing by, TVs being left on, similes gibberish, or whatever else is present in the lot. But once in a while, something will happen to one of your Sims, and you'll hear this. Every time a Sim's emotions change, a short 3 to 4 second jingle will play, and the jingle will obviously try to evoke the same emotion, whether it's angry, dazed, flirty, playful, bored, inspired, or uncomfortable. The emotions can also reach an upgraded tier and play an emphasized version of the jingle, and for example could go from happy to very happy. The jingles give an indication to the player that a particular Sim could need your attention now. Because when you're managing a family of 8 and you need to make sure everyone does their homework, eats their meals, goes to work on time, gets a proper amount of sleep, and just generally not become uncomfortable, it can be absurdly stressful, and any small reminders can make a world of difference. And when the jingle for the fine emotion finally plays, a huge weight is lifted off of your shoulders. They also occur during other events, such as when a fight is about to break out, when you get an achievement, or when a party starts. The silence of the world is a godsend, since any background music might be too distracting for the player. And The Sims is a game that requires a ton of micromanaging, and it definitely helps to make the jingles a very nice and memorable touch to a very memorable game. Not a lot to mention here because Toby Fox tends to be very big and not slow when it comes to his scoring. But in Chapter 2 of Deltarune, you're eventually given the ability to backtrack to the Trash Zone and enter the shop of one Spamton G. Spamton, as he's trying to con you out of your precious dial tone plays in the background. It's a very creepy, waltzy, short song that is very personifying of Spamton's character, because if you've played through Chapter 2, you'd know that he's quite the But I'm not done yet. In Chapter 1, there's this long stretch of path before you reach Card Castle, where the only music that plays is an oddly melodic clip of birds chirping. It isn't even really used to signify much, except that you're finally approaching your destination, after traveling a long way. And silence is used a lot in storytelling to precede big events. A sort of calm before the storm. It might not even really count as music, but Toby Fox has a tendency to upload sound effects as their own songs on streaming sites. And while we're on the topic, Undertale. Minimalism is used a lot more here because, well, Undertale is actually a finished game. But there's two specific times it's used that I want to talk about, and honestly, they couldn't be more opposite. First is when you visit Napstablook's house, and he shows you his different music records. One of them you play is called Spooktune. And obviously it's meant to sound bad and funny, to represent Napstablook's wholesome awkwardness. Same goes for the musical theme of the house itself, properly named Pathetic House. But the minimalist style is used to the complete opposite effect during the climax of the No Mercy route, when Flowey tells you about his dark backstory. It's used in juxtaposition to the happiness you felt in the same part of the story in the other routes, to give you a horrible sense of uneasiness,
anxiety, and fear.
It's a big reason why so many people remember this possible ending of the game. Except for, you know. Luigi's Mansion 3. Even though the game is not genuinely scary for the most part, because it's made to be a family-friendly game, the atmosphere and music of the different floors of the Last Resort Hotel creates an amazing and uncanny ambience. My personal favorite being the second basement floor, the Boiler Works. A banjo will play small licks in between the extensive wailing notes of a cello, meant to sound like pipes settling through a large, echoing space. Some different sound effects also play, like the hitting of metal pipes. And the echo itself is meant to be diegetic, since the level itself consists of huge rooms made solely of steel and concrete. The tension created by this music makes your first encounter with a ghost in this area much more effective, and this goes for every one of the 17 floors. But what about a game that is actually creepy? Inscryption is like Luigi's Mansion, but with way more teeth getting pulled out. You find yourself at a table playing a card game with a mysterious figure in a cabin teeming with little trinkets and tidbits of information. Your goal is to find a way out. Seems innocent at first, but you slowly realize that this man, this wannabe dungeon master, is playing a sick, twisted game, and there are things he doesn't want your meager eyes to bear witness to. This creates an especially unique atmosphere, one where you feel isolated and surrounded, one where you feel like you cannot win. Therefore, it only deserves a unique soundtrack. Like with Luigi's Mansion, the score is headlined by the different lingering string instruments, matching the cabin's southern and hillbilly aesthetic. The only time that they go away is in the withdrawal of battle, whether that be upon the defeat of a boss, or the defeat of yourself. The eeriness of the cabin is carried in part by the music being so devoid of emotion and stability. It complements how the player is left in the dark about so many things. But perhaps that's for the better. A game this incredible should never be spoiled. So do yourself a favor and play it for yourself. It might even make you smile. The return of the Obra Dinn immediately comes off the bat with a daunting task. You're a worker for the East India Company, given the job of traveling to an abandoned yet still afloat ship called the Obra Dinn.
Not many eager for that job.
You're given a magical watch called the Memento Mortem that has the ability to relive the death of any corpse. With just a single picture of the crew, and a list of everyone's name with their country of origin and position aboard, you have to identify all 60 members of the crew. Everyone from the captain, to the chef, to the third mate, has to be given a name and exactly how they met their doom. Daunting is an understatement. Impossible feels like a much better adjective. This is how the game explains its mechanics. Through these segments where the screen will focus on a certain aspect of the notebook, and give an explanation as to how to use it. As different blurbs of text appear on screen, they're orchestrated by the plucking of a string ensemble. This is my personal favorite type of scoring, because it is so reactive to what the player is doing. The use of strings makes it feel akin to someone mysteriously tiptoeing around, like there's something happening that you don't know, and a mystery overarching the game. And that is, what happened to the Obra Dinn?
You bastards may take exactly what I give you!
Luckily, what seems like a laughably impossible task turns into an incredible adventure where things begin to gradually fall into place. And more dots are connected to another set of dots that lead to a theory that cancels out your previous one. These sorts of eureka moments are punctuated by the music echoing into nothingness when you open the journal mid-flashback, giving you room and time to think. And think you will. By the time you finish your excursion aboard the ship, you'll have quite the tale to tell, and quite the game to remember. Outer space is the final frontier, one where no one can hear you scream or jump. It's why the Moon Kingdom from Mario Odyssey is such a memorable finale to the titular plumber's globe-trotting adventure. With the rest of the game featuring so many unique and grandiose locale, it's almost calming to finally be met with a flat plane, almost barren of gravity, a location lacking complexity. Much like the other vacant locations before, the pads of the moon's music will reverberate into nothingness, mirroring the expansive vacuum and weightlessness of the cosmos. The same is done to the ringing of the church bells on the other side of the kingdom upon your first arrival, because time is running out as Bowser and Peach are about to tie the knot. An astounding prelude to the climax. giving a sense of size and scale to the stakes in a way that is massively imposing, quite kindred to the formidable presence of the walking mausoleums in Elden Ring. But throughout everything, all of these pieces of media will typically focus on creating minimalism out of only a few of their moments, which tends to lean only towards one purpose and intention, whether it's being alone, or with nature, or with your friends, or with the devil himself. Having a soundtrack that contains a nuance between the extreme and simple can allow the consumer to sympathize with the protagonist, and can create a level of immersion unattainable by any other method imaginable. But there is one last game I want to talk about, because it's the first game I played that really used this style of songwriting to its advantage, and created an immensely wholesome and charming experience that I still remember fondly to this very day. And it's a game that I believe doesn't get anywhere near the attention it deserves. Pokepark Wii was one of my favorite games growing up, and is nothing short of an anomaly. Because in some ways, this is the open world game that Pokemon fans have been asking for as long as the internet has existed. And this came out 13 years before Legends Arceus did. But for those who don't know, Pokepark is a series of games set in the world of the same name. A magical place where wild Pokemon are allowed to roam free from the tyranny of humans. They don't say that verbatim, but that's basically what it is. The actual maps of the games are different between 1 and 2, but they're each split into zones or areas based on their theme and scenery. So in 1 you have meadow, beach, iceberg, cavern, lava, haunted, granite, and flower. And in 2 you have cove, arbor, crag, tech, and arcane. As soon as you enter a zone, you are immediately met with a vast, open playground of Pokemon, all living their own separate lives of leisure and freedom. And especially when upscaled, this game looks absolutely gorgeous. In terms of gameplay, you have the ability to challenge other Pokemon to what they call a skill game, which can include chase, hide and seek, obstacle jump, a quiz, or a full-scale battle. If you win, you'll get some berries, the in-game currency, to upgrade your abilities. And as my personal favorite part of the game, you will be able to play as that Pokemon in their respective attractions. The attractions are a list of 14 different minigames, each guarded by their own attraction keeper. In each attraction, Pokemon you can use have different power levels depending on how much sense it makes for them to be good. So if I select Magikarp in a racing minigame, he's going to be absolutely smoked by an actual fast Pokemon, such as Jolteon or Arcanine. Now it may sound like I'm sweet-talking this game to death and praising it as an absolute masterpiece, but after playing it all the way through to get footage for this video, I've come to the startling realization that this game is made for kids. And I don't mean this in the way that mainline Pokemon games are made for children. I mean this game is actually made for children. At least the normal games will have some challenge, and actually threaten to murder you. This game is just easy. Very much to a fault. And if that wasn't enough, the story is equally as childish. In short summary, you play as Pikachu. You and your friends fall into a hole that leads to Pokepark, and you all get separated. Mew comes to you in a dream and tells you that the world is going to end, or something in the likes of it. You travel to all the different zones, meet different Pokemon, collect the pieces, and go through some barrage of wacky antics, until you reach the Sky Pavilion, and Mew will tell you, "Great, now we can save the world, but we gotta play obstacle jump first." Despite earthquakes being an ongoing occurrence at that moment, I suppose there's zero urgency after all. But no one should have a need to get genuinely upset because it's meant to be one of those, with the power of friendship, anything is possible stories. which is fine in its own right, but it's something so cheesily childish that no one of age can really take it seriously. Even growing up, I knew the story was juvenile and nothing of note. No one in their right mind is playing Pokepark for the plot. I'd say the biggest reason why this game is remembered at all today is because of the experience itself. I'm sure if you asked any diehard Pokemon fan what fictional world they'd want to live in, they'd all say the same thing. So being able to have this game where you can walk around and interact with a realized world of Pokemon living on their own, having their own behaviors and traits, it instantly takes us back to when we were all young trainers and wanted to have a Pokemon to call our own in the real world, despite it being fiction. It gives a feeling of pure childlike warmth and coziness that envelops your senses like not many other games do. And as you might have assumed, this is very much in part thanks to Pokepark's beautiful, minimalistic soundtrack. And it is that to a much greater extent than the other games we already discussed. It's scored in a quite similar way to Breath of the Wild, where the music can get intense during times of great action, but for everywhere else, the music contains long strands of continuous silence. This is the music that plays in the first zone of the game, the Meadow Zone. As you can hear, it's an incredibly simple piece where a bassoon plays a variation of 9 different notes in a motif, followed by 3 seconds of complete silence. Although the theme can feel a bit eerie on its own, when you add the in-game ambience, the charm of the world comes to life. You can hear the wild Pokemon around you shouting with happiness or sometimes even anger as they play chase with their friends, thus causing the noise of their footsteps to differ depending on the Pokemon's weight. It's the addition of small details to the game's sound design that give it so much charm, and this carries over to all the areas you visit. Since everywhere is so thematically different, their music must be too, as well as the Pokemon that inhabit the zone. The second zone, the Beach Zone, boasts a predictable score of a Hawaiian guitar playing a motif reminiscent of an alleviating, sultry setting. Also predictable are the Pokemon you find there, like Vaporeon, Wingull, Feraligatr, Gyarados, and Azurill. But they aren't all there from the start. You see, when you first enter these zones, there aren't many Pokemon that live there initially. The first thing you're met with at the Beach Zone are these wide, flat, sandy plains that are almost completely empty, making the silence of the music once again feed the theme of loneliness. This is quite short-lived because for specific Pokemon, once you beat them at their skill game, they'll invite another Pokemon they know to come and play, leading to a small cutscene that plays this charming little jingle. Despite what you think, even as more and more Pokemon appear in the zone, the music will stay the same. Unlike in something like Mario Galaxy, where the main theme of the Cosmic Observatory will play a different version of its theme depending on your progress in the game. Instead, the game will play a quick motif whenever you enter certain spaces within each zone. It's a very small touch and doesn't do much in terms of varying the songs, but it's a great indicator that you're going to somewhere new. All of these rules apply throughout the many zones you'll travel to, so let's go on a little journey. The Iceberg Zone is scored by an entrancing grand piano with the splendor of the Aurora Borealis just overhead. The Cavern Zone consists of long maze-like tunnels, met with only the loud sounds of different synthetic-sounding drums. The growling trombone of the lava zone does an amazing job personifying the strength of the fire-type Pokemon that live there. The haunted zone bears an unnerving and creepy piece, featuring various string instruments as the many ghost Pokemon levitate up and down the corridors of the cursed mansion. But after you visited every place, you still have one more location on your list. And this last zone is the one that uses the game's musical style to the fullest possible extent. The Granite Zone is easily one of the most grand locations in the game, and therefore a stark contrast from everything before. It's a location full of ancient, primitive ruins and puzzles that originate from the earliest days of Pokepark's existence. Long hallways bearing walls of the zone's namesake, all wedged into a mountainside, with some parts peering out into an endless sea of clouds. The zone is almost designed as a trial for those wishing to reach the top of the mountain, and therefore some of the most powerful, imposing, and mysterious Pokemon reside there. Charizard, Absol, Garchomp, Flygon, Bronzor, Togekiss, Aerodactyl, Salamence, Staraptor, Tyranitar, Porygon Z. The widest variety of Pokemon a zone in the game has had so far. A roster like this gives a sense of majesty, grandeur, and the sounds of this zone demonstrate how to make an area feel like a grand finale. A xylophone playing different small chords at an uneven and free-flowing tempo, pausing between sets to let the tones echo down the passages. Echoing is what really sells the sound design for this area, and the other ones too. The Pokemon's cries each have their own amount of reverb, depending on their specific spot of the zones. And as a cherry on top of this fantastic cake, the location motifs are some of the coolest ones yet. All of these factors coalesce into making an almost somber tone for the Granite Zone, showing the end of your fun adventure is near. And this bleeds further into the true final area of the game, the Flower Zone. It's a very small area at the very top of the mountain, where you're meant to receive the last Sky Prism piece, but this is no simple feat, since you have to summon Rayquaza and beat his attraction to get it. And he's definitely not alone on the summit. Lucario, Dragonite, Mareep, Bellossom, Skiploom, and even Shaman just waltz around at their own leisure with the vibrant flowers. It's an odd lineup to be sure, but it definitely fits the idea of this zone being exalted and peaceful. Dragonite flying around doesn't come off as intimidating, but rather he comes off as a graceful, kind, and gentle creature. He doesn't even challenge you to a battle. He challenges you to a game of chase. He doesn't want to hurt you. He just wants to have some fun. A specific tranquil mood is created through the passive behavior of the Pokemon, and what is the most simple melody in the entire game. Nothing but a harp. The precipice of all of your efforts and strife, and you're met by a single instrument, the humble harp. An instrument used to represent pure bliss, and an escape from all of your worries. The sound of simplicity. The sound that can almost replicate the feeling of your own ascension to heaven, where your burdens are finally null and void. The sound that represents the end, death, the ultimate fate. Could Pikachu's quest through Pokepark be functioning as a metaphor for the human journey into the afterlife, thus creating a sort of reverse Dante's Inferno? Of course not. This game is made for children. And at the end of the day, that is all that matters. Music is weird. Not just because of the fact that different wavelengths hitting our eardrums can make us feel incredible emotions, but because those emotions are incredibly subjective. There is no absolute objective way to judge the quality of a song. One person could boast about how their favorite genre was life-changing for them and defines who they are, while another could dismiss that same entire genre's existence as a stain on the name of the medium. Even if one song may sound objectively bad and effortless, there still will be people that praise it. Inversely, some of the most profound and intricate pieces of music can be disliked just as much. This begs the question, how is it that these songs we've looked at today contain so little in terms of complexity, yet they somehow leave a bigger impact on us than some of the most elaborate compositions in all of gaming? A lot of the time we associate intricacy with quality, so how can the inverse be true as well to so many around the globe? Maybe it's because if history has proven anything, it's that freedom is one of the most driving forces of the human condition, no matter how that freedom is perceived. We want to achieve a state of control of our own lives, and to that extent we want to be able to perceive things in our own way and feel right and just. With something like a book, where everything is written in such detail that every little motion and tidbit of the story is blown under a microscope, there is very little room for the reader to create their own meaning and perceive the story in their own way, outside of picturing it inside their head. It's hard to put the author's intent to wayside when it's right there verbatim. Instead, when you have something like a song, the meaning could be completely different to you depending on where you heard the songs or the events surrounding it. Your perception of a song could completely flip if something were to come up, or you find out any new information. The music in video games allows us to associate it with individual experiences that we find unique to ourselves. No matter how the music sounds, we always associate it with memories, good and bad. And don't just take it from me.
I would replay Super Mario World all the time just to listen to that end credit soundtrack. I would replay the final boss so many times just to hear it. It was nostalgic.
I think one of my favorite themes still has to be Epona's theme. Just as a kid, I always loved listening to it. It was always really peaceful, and just, even now, it makes me nostalgic.
In Omori, there's this scene near the end of the game where the characters have this heart-to-heart, and the music just fits so well because it's bittersweet, but it gives you this sense of nostalgia and forgiveness.
The first time that I beat Undertale, the music that plays when you get to the surface really hit a chord with me because it's so calm and relaxing, and now every time I hear it, it like calms me down a lot. It makes me really happy.
The music in Animal Crossing is a big part of what makes the experience, but being able to always go visit KK Slider and see him do this like live performance added sort of an extra layer of intimacy that made the game feel a lot more comfortable and cozy. And revisiting the same songs in the new game as an adult with all the nostalgia attached to it is really surreal.
So I remember the intro to Prey from 2017. You start by going about your daily life, and things fall apart rather quickly. You wake up in the same starting daily environment, just as you had moments before, but by the subtle switch of the ambient background music, the mood has done a complete 180.
I think my favorite part of game music for me was when me and a few friends found the other side disc in a Minecraft server where it was really hard to get. And I think for about 15 minutes, we probably jammed to the music over and over again. And I hardly knew them at the time. Some of them are now probably my closest friends.
My most important memory of video game music is Outer Wilds, drifting away from the solar system, watching the planets come together in a line as all the different instruments from the travelers come into play and converge.
One video game that I remember playing when I was young was Civ 5. I remember getting really attached to, I think, Queen Elizabeth, and one of the pieces that played in the background was Jupiter, and I really liked that song, and I really liked the background track.
So the echoing theme of Half-Life reminds me of walking through the tunnels at each level, and the kind of pixelated feel of the music reminds me of the graphics, which aren't the best, but I look back at them with nostalgia.
When arriving at the City of Tears in Hollow Knight, the music, accompanied by the patter of rain, immediately portrayed to me that I was in a city once prosperous and powerful, now fallen to ruin. It brought out a feeling of remorse, but after murdering every citizen that tried to attack me, I realized that the city was beyond saving.
Hey there, this is Insane in the Rain Music. So, if I had to share a memory I have of how video game music influenced me while I was growing up, probably the best memory I have is of Pokemon Diamond and Pearl. I'm a musician. I created jazz covers of video game music on my YouTube channel, Insane in the Rain Music, for many years. And when I look back on some of my earliest musical influences, a lot of it comes back to video game music. So much of Pokemon Diamond and Pearl's soundtrack is influenced by jazz and themes like Jubilife City, the Pokemart theme, Mount Coronet, which are just really interesting songs that have really interesting harmony and really interesting melodies. And as a musician and an appreciator of music, including video game music, that stuff has stuck with me throughout all this time since then. So games like Pokemon Diamond and Pearl have really influenced my musical taste and what I look for in great music.
And I'd be lying if I said I didn't get a little teary-eyed listening to, of all things, the Wii Weather Channel. As weird as it may be, I just can't imagine my childhood without it. Your childhood wouldn't be complete without a soundtrack to accompany it. We all wish we could go back. Perhaps it's only human to wish for simplicity and have the urge to return to the good old days, even though they might have never existed in the first place. As day-to-day life can feel like an endless stream of tedium, sometimes it doesn't sound too bad to live out in the middle of the woods and get lost forever. To live without worry is the end goal in anyone's life. But, to a certain extent, people have become too fixated on this goal, an overindulgence of the simple and easily accessible. A lot of the time we choose what's easy and faster to consume, rather than what may be harder to digest. We choose Big Macs over gourmet burgers. We choose short-form content over 1-hour video essays. We choose audiobooks over the books themselves. And we choose to cope rather than find out the truth. If we are all gluttons, then simplicity is sinful. But when we didn't know any better, we were innocent. Who could blame us? We were just having fun. We were just enjoying the small moments and the memories they gave us. They may have seemed minimal within the moment, but looking back, I wish they lasted longer. Although the times may be gone, they most certainly are not forgotten. They just lie dormant within the songs of an almost bygone era in our own lives, when we had time to enjoy the smaller things. Wide open grassy fields, friendly next-door neighbors, vacations to the mountains, Saturday morning cartoons on cable TV, listening to birds chirping deep in the woods, lying on the ground and gazing into the ceiling, exploring unseen parts of our own house, playing cards, going to abandoned places you shouldn't be going, gazing at the stars, and playing games with your best friends. So few notes and yet so many adventures. And that truly is the beauty of it all. Now that is a good way to spend an hour. But before you go, there's a few things I would like to say. First of all, thanks for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I've been working on this video for like a year now, going as far back as January of last year for the first draft of the script, which is very long, by the way. This editing timeline is absolutely disgusting. And also there's a few people I would like to shout out. First of all, a huge thanks to Lethal Pilot for giving me feedback every step of the way and being my beautiful Minecraft model. His Twitch is linked in the description. Thank you to all these people for being featured in the memory section, and the biggest thank you to the legend himself, Carlos of Insane in the Rain Music. His channel is linked below. I want to make this video because I've always liked how some games use less music in order to put focus on the action. I feel that always allowed me to make memories more easily. And I know that the ones I talked about are far from the only examples of this. Here are some of the games I was planning on talking about originally. But that's for another day, because at long last, we are finally done here. This is the most ambitious thing I've ever done, so let me know what you think of it in the comments below, and please leave a like and subscribe. If this does well, you can expect more stuff like this in the future. Speaking of the future, in case you're wondering what's coming up next, I have a smaller video planned for later this year. But for my next big project, I have one question for you. How moral do you think you are?